The daughter castrated her father ruthlessly in order to avoid reconnecting the root of her life. She put it on the stove and burned it, and she threw it far away, and finally the father died tragically, and the daughter was released after 3 years of imprisonment. It's no wonder that these cases are called the most meaningful homicides. So what is the feud between the father and daughter? Let's find out. June 6, 1981. Bridget Harris was born in the backseat of a taxi outside a hospital in Staten Island, New York, to parents who were immigrants from West Africa, Liberia. Until he was 2 years old, Bridget lived with his mother. But he was soon abandoned, and then poor Bridget was left to live with relatives in Staten Island, Long Island, Rhode Island, and Liberia, and he moved with them, and there was no permanent home, but it was a large and divided family, full of abuse, infidelity, abandonment, rape, and deception. Grandmother is not a kind old man who scolds and scolds all day long. Not only does he hate children crying so much that as long as the children don't listen to his own arrangements, he will beat people with sticks. Even young Bridget. In short, in this big family, children are like slaves with the lowest status, and all relatives know what the problem is, but still let these depraved abuses go. Later, for some reason, his father, Eric Goudry, returned to Bridget, thinking that with his father's support, Bridget could finally say goodbye to those disgusting relatives. But he went from one hell to another, and Bridget remembers vividly that his father ordered him to take off his clothes and lie naked on the bed in the guest room, and then his father climbed on top of him and tried to have sex with him, and then the phone rang all of a sudden, and Bridget begged his father to answer the phone. But he didn't, and Bridget was in a lot of pain, and his father told him that it was normal in order to educate him about the physiology of the sexes, and Bridget was only 3 years old at the time. At the age of 4, his father's bestial behavior escalated again, and he did even more indescribable things. Apparently Bridget didn't understand these things at all, but his father smiled and said that he would teach him hand in the future, and day after day, Bridget was repeatedly beaten by his father, molested and raped, and he was not the only victim, and at the age of 12, Bridget was sent to Liberia to reunite with his mother, and I thought that I hadn't seen each other for many years, and the mother and daughter must have hugged each other and cried. But in fact, for Bridget, this is just one more abuser. His mother would often beat him with a rattan stick, leaving a shocking scar, so much so that Bridget would rather go back to his father. But at this time, his father's new girlfriend was not a good one, and he saw Bridget as a thorn in his side, not only beating him with a rattan, but also pouring chilly water into the wound afterwards. Bridget was living in dire straits, and in 1996, during the outbreak of the Liberian Civil War, Bridget escaped with a free flight, and then he was taken in by his father again in desperation, and he entered puberty, and apparently it made the old pervert even more tempted. And he told Bridget that no matter what the era, in Africa, fathers sleeping with their daughters were a way to show their love, and that's it. And his father often forced him to watch together, to do unspeakable things, to satisfy his bestiality. At the age of 17, Bridget finally found a chance to leave, and he managed to finish high school, and he went to college for another year, ready to build a new life, and then he got a job as a security guard in the cargo department at JFK. For $17 an hour. Like most young people, Bridget likes to go out with friends to watch the sunrise and have a bonfire party every now and then. She gets drunk trying to forget the pain. When you wake up, the dark family life is still a shadow that Bridget can't wave away in her heart, not to mention that he has been taught since he was a child inside the family. This kind of ulterior secret cannot be revealed to the public, but carrying so many painful memories, Bridget is so tired that he can't even have a good relationship. In April 2007, Bridget swallowed a drug while at work and tried to commit suicide, but fortunately was taken to the hospital by a colleague in time to save him back, and Bridget kept silent about the cause of the suicide, and a few weeks later, he accidentally learned from a relative that his father was about to return to the United States and would live at his sister Karen's house, and there was a young niece in the house, and Bridget was deeply unhappy, and he knew that Karen had also been raped and abused by her father, but the two of them had very different attitudes towards the past, and Bridget had not dared to fall in love for many years. On the contrary, Karen and 3 different men have children, but none of them can stabilize a relationship, and Bridget has been estranged from her father for several years, and Karen is very silent in comparison. But this time her father is going to live in her sister's house, which makes Bridget a little unable to sit still, and when Bridget comes to her sister Karen's house, she sees a scene that makes him sick to his stomach, and his innocent and cute little niece is sitting on his father's lap, and he is giggling, and his father also mentions that he will bring his granddaughter back to Liberia. After a while, Bridget was shocked. Of course he knew what it meant, and he had a big fight with Karen about it, and finally he told Karen that he would definitely find a way to stop this. And when he returned to his apartment, Bridget immediately searched the internet for a solution. But considering that he had left home since he was 17 years old, his father had never touched him again, and now he went to the police to tell the police, worried that his father would molest his niece, so he came to ask for help, and I was afraid that no one would accept it and the family would not support him. And it was at this time that Bridget stumbled upon Lorena by chance. Burbett's case. It was on the night of June 23, 1993. Lorena's husband came home drunk and forcibly had sex with her, after which Lorena got angry, went to the kitchen while her husband was asleep, picked up a 20-centimeter long meat cleaver, went back to the room, pulled the quilt directly, cut off her husband's genitals, and then drove out of the apartment, threw his life through the car window into the field on the side of the road. And after calming down, Lorena decided to call the police and turn herself in. After a large number of police searches finally found the root of the life, and then there was a series of emergency treatments plus 9 hours of lengthy surgery, and the husband's lifeline was finally reconnected. And the reason why Lorena did it was because she had been sexually abused, physically and emotionally abused by her husband for a long time in this marriage. And he would even show off his infidelity in order to force Lorena to have an abortion. And under this continuous abuse, Lorena began to have a mental breakdown, and she did such a cruel thing. After learning about Lorena's case, Bridget was inspired, and he also thought of a good way to destroy his tools without actually killing his father. On June 26, 2007, Bridget bought a pack of scalpels for $6.83 on top of Ib. And then he and his father made an appointment to meet on the morning of July 28th to have a good talk. And soon the time came to the agreed day. And on the way back to the apartment together, Bridget found that his father, who was 55 years old, had lost a lot of weight, but he still didn't forget to stare at all kinds of little girls. This made Bridget secretly swear that he must complete his revenge plan after returning to the apartment. The father and daughter sat down and started chatting. Bridget recalled the first time his father raped him. He only said one sentence, "How do you remember this? Wasn't he only 3 years old at the time?" Apparently, the father didn't bother to deny it. He tried to avoid the topic in an understatement. Bridget didn't care about it. He continued to reminisce. But his father claimed that these were just teaching him about the sexes and teaching him how to be a real woman. Not to mention, my father always felt that this was not a big deal. And what annoyed Bridget the most was that her father mentioned that her half-sister had been gang raped as a child, and Bridget couldn't stand it anymore, and the culprit didn't realize how badly his actions had hurt the girl. And now his father was trying to bring his young niece back to Libya, and he instantly got angry, and he picked up the pepper spray and sprayed it at his father, and then they scuffled together, and thanks to the previous security training, it didn't take a few tricks for Bridget to subdue him, and that's it. The unconscious father was leaned back on a chair, and when he woke up, he screamed loudly, and Bridget quickly gauged his mouth with a towel and wrapped duct tape around his head. And finally Bridget took off his father's pants, and first tried to cut off his life with scissors. And it turned out that the scissors were too dull, and Bridget went to find a scalpel that he bought online, and cut it off with a knife. And after the fact, he thought that Lorena's case might be reconnected. So Bridget didn't do anything, and simply put his father's crime tools directly on the stove and roasted them. He didn't give up until he saw the smoke of the burned, and then wrapped the burnt life root in a tissue, and then rushed out of the apartment and threw it on the curb of the road. And then Bridget called 911 and reported what had just happened, saying that he was on his way to the police station. And the second call, Bridget called Karen, and after learning the ins and outs, told him to come to him first, and then sent him to a psychiatric center. And when the police arrived at the scene, they found that Bridget's father had suffocated to death, and Bridget had not shown up for a long time. At the same time, Karen didn't want to be cowardly anymore, and he wanted to hire the best defense lawyer for his sister, and to expose all the bestiality that his father had done to them, because Karen had been abused throughout her childhood, and he had set up a website to raise more money for Bridget's legal defense. Attorney Arthur Adaler, after learning what had happened to the sisters, decided to take the case for free, waiving the high legal fees. According to the police investigation, Bridget once called himself the goddess of revenge on his social networking site, and he also said that he would not really kill his father, but if he wanted to stop him, he had to take his weapon. In fact, for so many years, Bridget has been very resistant to asking for help from the outside world, although he was diagnosed with severe trauma or stress disorder and personality disorder. But he did not want to uncover his scars, so he never took medication. August 16, 2007, during the trial, Bridget told the jury that he did so it was because he didn't want to see his nieces repeat the mistakes of himself and his sister. In the end, Bridget was charged with second-degree murder and first-degree manslaughter, and was imprisoned on Nick's Island 2 years later. He appeared in court again. The prosecutor believes that Bridget's actions against his father were premeditated, but he repeatedly defended himself. The motive for the murder was not revenge, but to prevent the father from taking his granddaughter to Liberia. September 30th, 2009, the jury's brother Bridget was guilty of the death of his second sister. The murder charge was relatively minor, but the judge still insisted Bridget was sentenced to up to 5 to 15 years in prison. But in the end, he only served 3 years in prison before he was awarded Christie. And at this time in prison, Bridget had never been more at peace, and he wanted to finish college and open a restaurant after he got out of prison. And he worked hard to learn cooking skills, and he took college courses through a prison education program, and at the same time, he obediently received psychiatric treatment, and he took drugs. In short, Bridget was so confident about the future that he decided to join an organization to end domestic violence after he was released from prison. Pull up those poor people who fell into the abyss. So that's the end of this video. What do you think of this ending? You can leave a message below the comment area. Then if you think the video is doing well, don't forget to like, collect, and follow. I'm Zhang Zhang. Let's see you in the next video.